and I think we'll just start and we'll talk and have a good time. I'm excited about this topic because it's near and dear to my heart. And just for anybody who happens to be checking in, I'm Amy Millman. I'm the founder of Springboard Enterprises, which is an NGO whose mission is to support women entrepreneurs, specifically those that are tech driven and also in life science. And it's I don't know what we got a screen share that probably doesn't need to go in here. I don't know how to stop it.
I think I messed that up. I'm sorry to all.
All right, let's save that. I don't want you to totally leave, though.
I don't either. Oh, wait, I think I know how to do this.
There you go.
Better?
That's
okay,
great.
Sorry for the technical difficulties.
That's all right. We're trying. We're doing all this stuff. So, and I ran that organization for over 20 years with an amazing result for focusing on the resources that women entrepreneurs need to sort of succeed in what their dreams were. And I could give you a lot of statistics on it, but suffice it to say, we've made some significant progress in populating the world with women leaders in the business, especially in the entrepreneurial innovative sector of our markets. And there's more to come with that. I think we've just basically seeded things, and we'll see how things going. But with me today is one of my Springboard co-founders, Andrea Silbert, who I met probably 30 years ago. She was just a child with a great background. Andrea runs an organization, a philanthropic organization called the EOS Foundation that has been doing phenomenal work in supporting communities and families and children and all of the foundation that we need to have a really healthy society and a thriving economy that everybody participates in. And I didn't take that from what she wrote, what's written on her website, but I highly suggest that you all go check it out. It's a sleeping giant that has done some phenomenal work. And so we're going to talk today about a few things, but particularly about an initiative that Andrea is spearheading at EOS that I'm fascinated with. I always say very specifically that a lot of the issues that we have as women in the field of business or social ventures, entrepreneurship, is because there's not a lot of data and research out there to kind of back up the need for more activity and investments in the things that matter to us or the things that we're working on. And so Andrea has actually started a project which is probably going to help us along significantly in really understanding the underpinnings of what's really happening in leadership positions for women in all different industry sectors and access. And Andrea's background and basically her thesis is almost exactly the same as what EOS is really promoting. And through her background in both Wall Street and sort of leaving that to go and produce results in Latin America with Women's World Banking, Echoing Green. She's a fellow, and so there's this. Can we really understand, what's really going on, rather than just some general things of we're making progress? And there's a couple of women that we see at the head, but maybe there's more to it. So, later on, we'll talk a little bit about, our entrepreneurship journey and experience that we had in the women's business sector. But I wanted to talk about Andrea's experience on what she's calling the women's power starting that again, the Women's Power Gap Initiative. The goal to dramatically increase the number of women leaders, and doing that by collecting data and really understanding what's really going on. So let's talk about this. I know that I read one of the reports or one of the releases on this, and basically you said that if women account for 51.5% of the U.S. population, why is it that they're severely underrepresented in leadership positions? And I can speak for hours about that, but I want to hear from you. So can you talk a little bit about the impetus for this?
Yeah. So Amy, you and I have been at this for a long time, right? We've been at this 25, 30 years. And, we haven't seen significant change. And we need women and people of color. We need fair representation at the top levels of leadership because we have systemic biases, the whole way our society is created and the way businesses are run. So kind of enough is enough. I don't want to pass this on to my daughter. I certainly don't want to pass it on to granddaughters and grandsons because men care as well. We have to go after the C-suite. We have to go after the CEOs. We have to have representation and not 5%, of the Fortune 500. No, that's great progress. Like, we can't take the slow boat. So what we are looking at, and I am a data person and a person who likes numbers, but I'm also an advocate. And so it's really important to marry data and advocacy and persuasion and marketing and branding and messaging. So what we have stumbled upon is an approach where we look at different sectors of the economy. So the first one we looked at, and we just did a pilot in Massachusetts, which we've now launched nationally. And we said, okay, let's look at the higher education sector because we can get the data is public. And let's look at the 90 or so colleges and universities in Massachusetts and how many have a female president, have ever had a female president, have a provost. We looked at different categories and we applied weightings to them and we ranked them. Now we did this in 2018. It ended up being very good timing because of Me Too, which I think is now not a Me Too movement, it's a gender equity movement, right? And we have a racial equity movement, and we're bringing them together. A lot of our work is around women of color. So we ranked all these universities, and we're in Massachusetts. So we have MIT and Harvard, and we have our community colleges. And surprise, surprise, the community colleges were very good with women leaders and women on their boards and et cetera. And the prestigious institutions were not so much. And so when you do this company level data and then you rank them against one another, they pay attention. So for instance, Tufts University ranked lower than any of us expected. I know Tufts really quite well, and they have a very diverse student body, and it's one of their values. But you have to look at your representation, your leadership, what we call your power structure, every minute of every day. You have to keep looking at it because gravity brings you back to the norm. And the norm right now, as I joke around, is a 6 foot tall white guy in a nice suit with a buzz cut, not quite a buzz cut, but short hair. So you're going to always, the gravity's going to always bring you back to that is the leader you want, right? And we have to break that open. So, so they, all good intentions, they weren't where they wanted to be. And they came to us and they said, oh, the methodology needs to be tested. And I said, give me any other methodology because what we're doing is relative. So if you think that I didn't count enough points in this thing and that thing, I'll change it for everybody, but it's relative. So they finally said, yeah, okay, there's not a lot changed in methodology. And they went out and they hired the first female dean of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, which is extraordinary. And they made changes. And so the next year we did it again. And I think the key to our approach is you have to keep doing it because what's really moving these folks are two things. One, reputational risk, right? That's very important to all institutions, all companies. And the second thing is everybody that we've come across actually has good intentions. They say, I want diversity at the top. We want a diverse board. We want a diverse C-suite, but we just can't find the women. We can't find the women of color, the men of color. And when you rank, what you show them is, well, other people have found ways to do it, right? So instead of thinking we're doing all that we can, it opens up the thinking and the brain, and to think about, maybe you need to change the criteria for your board to have a more diverse board. Maybe you're undervaluing certain things. So, so the second year that we did the ranking, we worked with a few presidents who were really interested in the subject, and we brought 40 college presidents together to talk about it. And then they wanted to collectively problem solve around this. They learned from one another. We just did a 3-year summary, just at the presidential level, to see had we made progress. And what was phenomenal is that in just 3 years, the number of women of color presidents among Massachusetts colleges and universities doubled. It doubled. There were 5 when we started, and now it more than doubled. There are 11. So that they are 13% of all of our college and university presidents in Massachusetts are women of color. The national average is 5%. And it was doing the data, spotlighting the data, but bringing people together to problem solve. And so we're really excited, and we're rolling this out now nationally because we found something that works.
So what's so interesting about this, and I remember when I was very young and looking for my first job, when I was still in high school, you looked in the paper and it was help wanted male, help wanted female. And the female jobs, I know people laugh at that and everything, but that's what it was like when I was very young. And we just assumed that there were certain jobs that were for women and certain jobs that were for men. And I remember there was a woman who was a VP at a local bank. And basically, she was the secretary, but everybody in the bank always got a VP title. So she was a VP, but everybody in the bank had that same title. So it was, we just, that was the odd woman out. And I think about how far we've come in this. But the collection of the data and the ranking of it sort of reminds me of a conversation about 3 or 4 years ago that I had with a couple of pharmaceutical executives. And I said, what are you doing as far as women's health? Are you focusing on women's health? Is there, tremendous issue. Again, 51.5% of at least the US population are women. And they said, well, it's kind of a niche market. And we laughed so much about that. And then I thought, that's really not funny that they're actually assuming that. And you could probably say that, I remember years ago when you and I started working together, Andrea, when you were running the Center for Women in Enterprise, that the people in the White House basically said that women had hobby businesses. And so it wasn't worth the investment in data. That's lifestyle businesses. Actually, somebody in the White House said to me it was hobby businesses. And we've come a long way in at least recognition of women having an ability to take these leadership positions and do the jobs. But I'm really interested in gathering around those university folks what they were thinking, what were those myths that they had to dispel about their process? Did they, I'm assuming there were a lot of aha moments, but also because clearly there was a change afoot, but was there some compelling stat that was, that they found, most persuasive?
Yeah, I would say there are a couple things. So first of all, we did a list of all the schools that had never had a female president. So we published that list. No one wants to be on that list. So that's motivational, that's a stick. But I actually really think that when we all came together and when some of our male allies heard, if you're saying you can't find Black women, and 8 of these 11 are Black women, and I think the racial equity moment had a lot to do with it as well. If you're saying you can't find Black women, Latina women, then you need to come to other people. You need to expand your networks, or you need to just keep the search open until you do. No one ever said it's going to be the exact same process that you're using or that it's going to be easy, but the onus is on you. And that was like revolutionary to a lot of these guys who were allies. Everyone who showed up, with a couple exceptions, some people showed up because they thought they had to. If they're not there, then that would be the story. But most of them showed up because they wanted to learn. And I think it's, you and I and everyone who's listening to this conversation, we're seeped in it. And sometimes it's really important to take yourself away and understand that a lot of these men and some women, mostly white, I find that women of color are closer to their audiences and their employees and all of that. They've grown up in a really hierarchical society, rigid rules. This is how things work. And you and I, especially as entrepreneurs, we just never process. That's not a lens we use to process anything. The way it's always been done, is the way we should do it. But a lot of people are, and I think it's really important to understand that something which seems so obvious is, well, if you can't find women who meet your board criteria, change the criteria. That's actually really eye-opening to some people. They haven't thought about it. The criteria is the criteria. So I think that that's what happened. I think that a lot of the folks who participated said, and we also, worked a little with board chairs, and the board chairs are the presidents. We said, you can find women of color to lead your institutions. You just have to really look. You have to look nationally, and you got to ask for help and networks. So it's a good news story. It really is a good news story.
So the thesis of EOS is really, to be honest with you, to come up not only to make investments and to spark change, but also to come up with solutions. And I know that your plan is to expand on this initiative to other industry sectors, other areas, and hopefully take this also for universities out of Massachusetts. I'm assuming it was more national in some of the things you were thinking of. So talk a little bit about that. Where does that go?
So the higher ed is we already issued a national report, and all of this can be found on our Women's Power Gap website. So the Women's Power Gap is now becoming sort of the biggest piece of what we do at EOS. We also do anti-hunger funding and some other stuff, but this is becoming the biggest piece of what we do. And I think it will become the Power Gap itself, dealing with both gender and racial justice, will become really central, primary to what we're doing. So it's on womenspowergap.org if anyone wants to see it. So we took the higher ed stuff and did it nationally because that's the industry we know best. And we released a report in February that looked at the 10 highest paid individuals at all of the major universities, these elite research universities. So that's something that's right on our website. There's a nice webinar. We worked with AAUW on that. The next thing we'll be doing in December is this ranking. So that comes next. So we looked at money, and now we're looking at representation or power in terms of positions. So what I really want to do is Fortune 500. I mean, that's what we got to do. We got to do it. And it's just a really big data set, honestly. We're trying to figure out how to do it. We spoke to Equilar. They have a lot of the data. It's really important to have race data. That holds us back. The gender data, we use our eyeballs to get, and data transparency, it's very boring. It is the most foundational thing that we could do to bust this whole thing wide open, because then we can do that with all these industries. Is if we knew what the gender and race were for the C-suite, for the executive leadership teams, we could do this the Fortune 500 or whatever you want to, Equilar 500 is what we've been talking to them. So that's what's next, and that has to happen. Because as I said, when you do it this way, what you create is a spiral up, a virtual spiral up versus a spiral down. It's a race to the top. Everybody says, oh, gee, this other company did it. They've got 50% women on their board. They've got 30% women in the C-suite. So if they can do it, we can do it. It's so exciting. So that's what we're trying to figure out is how to do the Fortune 500. And of course, Amy, I've talked to you about this, is we got to do venture capital, right? We've got to rank these firms. I mean, gosh, we've seen almost no progress in the number of women investment professionals in 30 years since you and I started on this work. So we've got to do a ranking.
And I think that we talked about this 20 years ago, which was, should we focus on entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurs, with the deal source, or should we focus on the investor side of things? And I think back in 2000, we probably had more women investors than we probably do now. Although the amount of money going to women-led companies are still in the single digits, and maybe there's another way that those businesses are getting funded. Certainly at Springboard, the entrepreneurs have been very, very successful in raising capital and growing those businesses, but that's one at a time, almost. And so, we're talking again about, over 50% of the world's population and people who don't have the access and great potential to be leaders, but are not seen as such. I love the beginning where you talked about, the typical, Fortune 500 or university president is supposed to look a certain way. We used to say that about people running for president, had to look a certain way until, of course, you got in the States to Barack Obama, sort of changed the whole paradigm, not necessarily the perception forever, but what does a president look like? What does a leader business leader? What does a university president look like? And I think we're still, plodding along, pushing that rock up a hill about perceptions. Data does help. I remember when you and I were working on women's business ownership issues in the early days, we were using data from the Census Bureau that basically said that, I think somebody summarized it saying, we don't know why women are starting businesses because they don't make any money. And the revenues just didn't seem to be impressive, which again is probably why they called them lifestyle or hobby businesses or businesses on the side. But that's changed, not significantly, but it's changed. And what you're finding is much more of it, at least an appreciation. You see media stories about women, driving change in this area. We've got the president of the NASDAQ and the president of the New York Stock Exchange are both women. So in the corporate world, I think I'm looking forward to seeing your project on your initiative on CEOs of corporate world, because I think we're going to see that maybe there's a model there that helps with that change rather than let's just find a woman. And I wonder if these models, these solutions have become apparent to you through this, other than just going outside your comfort zone to recruit. Were there any models or any best practices that have arisen since you started the initiative?
Yeah, I mean, succession planning, that's absolutely critical. So we've talked to some male allies who've said, I know I'm going to move on in a few years and I've recruited this woman in as provost. So that's extraordinarily important, is succession planning. And then you just actually really need a board commitment, and you need all institutions the CEOs should be compensated based on diversity at the top. And diversity in all ways, disability, veterans. I mean, you have to have diverse lived experience at the top, right? When you talked about your example of, have you thought about having a women's healthcare initiative? I mean, not having diverse lived experience at the top, well, they're losing a business opportunity, right? With that one. So boards need to say, okay, and it's easier. You only have one shot at a president, right, or a CEO. So maybe that opens every 10 years, but you keep your eye on it and have a succession plan. But then you look at the C-suite, you have to have a goal. We have 6 C-suite positions. Our goal is in 3 years to have 1/3 women, 25% women. Whatever it is, you have to have goals, and the board has to manage to those goals. Well, the company manages, but the board has to ask the management, let's report on the goals at every board meeting. There's so many solutions. And actually, we are working with AAUW to write some of those up for higher ed, doing a roadmap. So we've seen quite a bit. And then the last thing I'll say is, gosh, some of these companies, like Massachusetts, we have these brilliant people who just found the vaccine to COVID-19. I mean, these are some pretty smart individuals, right? I think they can figure it out. I think they can just figure it out. You know what I mean? It's kind of not my problem, but we have seen some practices. But I think that if it's a priority for you, if it's a top 3 priority for your business, and your board tells you to have a diverse management team and diverse C-suite, diverse executive level leadership team, diverse, and have different goals, you'll figure it out. You'll hit goal because you're pretty smart. You just got the coronavirus vaccine in 12 months.
This reminds me of a video that you and I did back in the day, where we filmed some of the clients from the Center for Women in Enterprise. And I remember there was a quote that one of the women said, what I've learned in this process is to work smarter, not harder. And I love that. I've kept that all these years in my mind, is how do you do this smarter? And you've just sort of identified that. It really is a driver for how we think about this. I also love the fact that you involved community discussion in this initiative. So it wasn't as if you were sort of doing this in a vacuum with just data, but you were encouraging discussion around this. And so I think that goes for all of these pieces to engage people. One of our entrepreneurs that I've worked with for many years is a woman named Mae Jemison. She was the first Black woman in space, and she ran a commission or a council at the National Academies of Medicine, talking about ways in which we can actually affect change in diversity and inclusion in the medical field. And she said, we can talk about this till the blue in the face, but we have the data. We know what's there. Now, where are the solutions and the activations that need to happen? And you get smart people in a room or a very large network. And that's something that, goes back to the last thing that I want to talk about, which is really about networks and the power of communication, building networks together and communicating. And I know at CWE back in the day, it was about building that New England network that supported the companies as well as the trainings that you gave. At Springboard, we probably have about 5,000 people that have participated at Springboard with our companies to offer their advice, their human capital, to the companies to help them, have a meaningful impact on their next phase of growth. And so I believe very strongly that data, networks, and promoting your non-traditional leaders are going to be a major growth area for us as we go along. And And I've learned that certainly. That was my whole calling card, was we're building a network that's going to surround and watch the back of all of these women who are doing extraordinary things. Just thought maybe you have some last thoughts on the value of that and what's to come.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to just say that Springboard and being a part of the founding team and watching you and providing whatever help I could to you as the CEO of Springboard. I mean, gosh, it's phenomenal what we accomplished. And it's so unusual. It's actually, typically somebody, and usually a guy, would have an idea, run his business. And what you did is you reached out to a bunch of us, and we were there for you, and you were open to guidance and feedback, and we were not threatened to have you run with it all. And talk about a collective success. So the networks, what I'm really interested in is peer networks. I think we underestimate how much power we have. I'm interested in mutual aid. Right now we do a lot of anti-hunger investing, and I was at my trustee meeting this morning, and I was saying, this whole model of food banks it's not keeping current. What we're seeing is communities coming together and have these community refrigerators, and they're feeding each other, and somebody who barely has enough to eat herself is putting food out for the person a little worse off. And I think entrepreneurs need to come together in that same spirit, and we're powerful. Oh my God, 5,000 people, Amy, some of whom have done really, really well. And I think we underestimate our strength. And I think we have a lot of strength. And I think now is our moment. Now is our moment. It is a moment for racial justice. It's a moment for gender justice. And I'm really interested in sort of this super majority. We're doing some work in Massachusetts, promoting some legislation where we have a big Black economic group and a Latinx economic group, and we have a women's group, and we're all coming together, and we're 65% of the population. I think we're going to get stuff done.
There was a quote that I saw and I've kept, and I think I put it on my LinkedIn site. So behind every successful woman is a tribe of other successful women who have her back. And
yeah, it's so true.
And I think that that's probably the most important thing that I can think of. And there's a new the spirit for the whole entire summit. So thank you for giving us this platform. And I don't know if you want to say a last word, but we've had a great time having this conversation.
Well, I was just going to say, you ladies have been that anchor from as long as I've known, just, investing in other women and keeping this momentum going all these years. And so grateful for all the work that you're doing. There was another woman entrepreneur that was in the session right before mine. And I told her, she said, when is Amy speaking? And I said, she's right here. She's right now. Lubna, are you still there? If you all are, request share audio, video, and I'll bring you up if you can. We've
known Lubna a long time. She is a relentless entrepreneur.
Yes. So it is that community of 5,000 that you mentioned. There's two of us right here watching still, and it's the power. It's exponential, and so great that this time is bringing us all together. And so happy to be so closely connected to you still, Amy, like with all the work that you're doing. And Andrea, so great to meet you, and grateful for all your work as well.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this platform that you have created. I'd love to stay involved.
Yes, ma'am. After this session is over, we're going to share this in our digital library. And we have now built the new website, Amy. It's live, and it's going to be tokenized. I'm just going to put it in the chat thread so you can take a look at it, both of you, since you are online. But everything in here, and Amy is actually on here. One second, amplifyinghervoice.com. Yes, we're going to pull together everything, the International Women's Day Summit, the Mother's Day Summit, now the Father's Day Summit. We've probably got probably collectively 3,000 attendees, like 700 speakers from over 120 countries that have been a part of this just right now in the pandemic. So we're going to amplify this again in the fall. And however you all want to be included, involved, we're just going to build everything from this panel forward. And then those people that listen to your video, that watch your video, they will receive tokens. So our goal is to basically reward everyone that's participating, either by engaging in your content or listening to a podcast or whatever it may be. So the link is in the chat.
And we're also excited that you're posting the 5 podcasts that we did on your podcast channel, your foundation. So tell the stories of some of the women entrepreneurs that we've worked with who are building transformational businesses. So many different ways in which you are communicating what's really going on. And hopefully you can post about Andrea's EOS Foundation's Women's Power Gap report and some of the work that they're doing, because that's a powerful impetus for change.
Absolutely. So I'll have our editor, Kimberly Hosey, reach out, and we publish a weekly newsletter, and anything that goes in our newsletter comes on our mobile apps, Andrea. They're going to be in Android, iOS, and KaiOS. KaiOS works on $20 mobile phones across Africa, Latin America, reaching the bottom billion. So this was our COVID solution innovation for women who can't read, women that don't have literacy, and girls who are out of school, like they don't have access to computers and Zoom and things like that. So we're really trying to take the content that you work so hard to produce, get that out there to people that are actually going to read it, use it, and make something happen with it. So yes, appreciate it.
I have to jump, but so nice to be a part of this, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea.
Bye.
All right. Bye, guys. Thanks so much. Bye.